Welcome back to the Stop Faking Fine podcast. I'm your host and widow friend, Dana Lewis, and I am super excited to share my next guest with you. Cory, welcome to the Stop Faking Fine podcast.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, for sure. You guys, I met Cory like maybe a month ago, and we instantly became friends. He is the founder of The Mental Gym, which I cannot wait to talk more about. Just the proactive mental health tips, tricks, and just life stories that Cory can share with us. I feel like my heart was connected to your heart when we were talking about your mom and about your story, and just all of the listeners know that my husband passed away, 10 years ago, and just the strength and the learning that it takes to grow through that. Like, I would love for you, if you would, to share a little bit about your story and your journey and what made you create the Mental Gym.
Sure. I think for me, this starts probably around high school, where that feeling like you have potential and you want to realize that potential, but you're not quite sure what that potential is or how you're going to realize it or any of that, right? And like, who's going to show me how and who's going to lead me?
I'm still working on that.
Right? Yeah, I know. I said high school, but it's true. Like I think there are so many of us who, in fact, I know there are so many of us who still have that feeling. Like, I've got another level to get to. I've got more to be, or maybe it's more to give or more to do, whatever it is. But we want more out of life, and we're not sure what more is or how to make more happen.
Yeah.
And that's a huge frustration, actually a huge pain point for a lot of people. It's just one that we tend not to talk about for some reason. And
no, you fake it. You fake it,
right? But in faking it, you kind of feel like you're the only one who feels that way, and that no one else would even understand you. So why would I talk about it?
Right.
Anyway, so that was always like a big theme for me in my life. And then when it comes to mental health, so that came on my radar around that same time too. My mom suffered from mental illness, but nobody talked about it then, right? Very like a real stigma about it. And so she tried to hide it from us and from really everybody, as people still tend to do. I mean, just kind of a side note, I just feel like this mental health stigma is so ridiculous, and it's so harmful. Like, we all have mental health, every one of us.
And even the mental health that we have oscillates on a daily basis. So because you maybe feel depressed in a moment doesn't mean that you are depressed. We have to give ourselves the ability to feel all the feelings in all of the moments, right? Rather than have the stigma around a box that now you're stuck in.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I would maybe add like one kind of twist to that, is that you said, our mental health maybe changes day to day. So I think mental health very much like physical health. You can be a super physically healthy person and you'll still have days where, I don't know, maybe your stomach feels off or you have a headache or something like that. It doesn't mean that your physical health or that you're any less healthy. It just means even when you are healthy, you still have natural ups and downs and ebbs and flows. And so it's the same thing with our mental health. As the healthier we get, the more mentally fit we get, we're still going to have ups and downs in life, because this is life and we're human beings and that's just a part of life. But how we deal with those ups and downs and how we navigate them and how quickly we snap back to our normal, super healthy, showing up at our best level, that's where we want to be and that's how we want to live.
I call that stress resilience. So how resilient are you in the face of hitting something that really is stressful, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, resilience is a huge mental gym theme. Obviously, it's such an important part of who we are and how we want to show up and the kind of lives we want to live. We want to live our best lives at work and at home. On a scale from 1 to 10, we call it living your 10. And everybody knows how to show up well when things are great and you're feeling great and you're on top of the world and everything's working so well at work and at home. But we know that again, there's
life,
and downs, right? And things happen. And so who you are and how you choose to show up and how you think and make decisions and behave during those low spots, it plays such a massive role in whether you live your 10 or you don't live your 10.
100%. Like this podcast was birthed out of me recognizing that I wasn't living my 10, right? And I didn't know. I think there's a real struggle with, okay, if I'm living a 5, what are the action steps to get to a 10? And that's what you teach in having mental fitness, mental strength.
Yeah. I mean, it's, very manageable bite-sized improvements. I think a lot of the time people, when they recognize they're at a 5, 6, 7, even 8, like we work with people who are at an 8, but they know that they want more, right? And more isn't more stuff. I want to be very clear on that. Although mental gym people do tend to make more money and get promoted faster and things like that because they're showing up in a different way and on a different level. But it's not about more stuff. It's more to life. It's happier. It's being more fulfilled. It's having better relationships. It's feeling great day in and day out. I mean, it really is living your best life, right? So we want that. Many people aren't living their 10, like you said. In fact, most people are closer to a 5 or a 6 than their 10. They don't know how to live their 10. Just like you said, it's not like they taught us this stuff in school, right? They taught us how to live a 6, maybe a 7, not our 10. It's true. That was so frustrating for me, like recognizing that in school, like who's going to show me how to
How did you let's pause there for a second. How did you recognize that? So your mom how old are you when you realized that your mom had a mental illness?
I was kind of in my mid to late teens.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what did that raised your awareness to understand that she was not living her 10? And how did that kind of shape you in that moment?
Well, it's a good question. I'm not really sure how it shaped me at the time. I remember this big feeling of like, there's nothing I can do to help her or to save her kind of thing, which was a really tough thing. Like to see somebody that you love so much, really struggle. And again, I didn't see the whole side of it because she tried to protect us from it, me and my brother. And, so I actually had no idea how bad things were until I got a phone call one day telling me that mom tried to take her own life.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Thank you. But it was,
I can't imagine. Like I can't imagine the weight that has on your mind and your heart and how you mentally, how you get mentally strong enough to move forward.
Yeah, it was hard. I mean, it rocked me, right? It's like, you don't see that coming. Nobody expects that sort of thing. I mean, it was less alarming or shocking, I should say. It was certainly alarming, but less shocking the next time I got a call saying the same thing. Mom tried to do it again. And then from that point, I was just kind of on pins and needles every time the phone rang. It didn't matter who was calling. Just you hear the phone ring and I would like freeze up. Like my heart would drop and I'd feel this feeling in my gut that like, this is the call. And then sure enough, like one day that was the call. She went through with it and she was gone.
I have to just pause, like, so sorry. And you are a warrior taking that pain and the mental triumph that you have, the mental journey that you've gone on, and now you're teaching things to other people from that. So what did you learn? What did you do next? What were the steps?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing was I was scared. I was scared that it might be genetic, and that it could be coming from me. And, going back to that, wanting to realize my potential and live my best life, and just knowing how much that could entirely derail what I really wanted out of life.
Right.
That scared me. And I remember thinking at the time I was actually a psychology major, and I'd always liked knowing how things work so I could improve them. And I would always challenge things when people would say like, that's just how things work. I'd be like, that's not a good answer. Tell me why and tell me why and tell me why. And my father taught me at a pretty young age to really start thinking differently. He was a lawyer and he was a very bright guy. And every night at dinner table, especially like in my teenage years, he would give me like a scenario, like a world issue or a political situation or a legal issue or something like that. And he would say like, tell me what you think. And so I'd have to think about it. I'd have to kind of formulate an argument or a position or something like that. and I'd present it, and he would, not like a formal presentation, right? We're just talking over dinner, but he would say to me like, that was really well thought out, and then you make a really good point, but what about this? And he would just play devil's advocate all the time, which I loved, in that it was really like my favorite thing, because it was really challenging me to think differently and at a higher level. It was also the most frustrating thing, right? Because I could never win, if you will.
Yeah.
But
you never got just like a good job. Okay, on to dessert.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, right. It was, he took me through the ringer, but I really appreciate it, because to me, it was like holding me to a higher standard and a higher level, and he was challenging me to be my best. And so I really, really enjoyed that. So I was always kind of, I kind of call my situation like a perfect storm, if you will, because in my younger years, my parents were wonderful. They were not always together, right? They were together and apart, and together and apart, and together and apart. And that was challenging for sure, but they were wonderful parents. And I think they prepared me very well just to think differently about life and understand things a little bit differently. And so when things started getting really bad with my mom, also shortly after my mom's passing, my dad began his battle with addiction. I don't even know if I call it a battle, just addiction took over his life, and then just went down a really bad road and never turned back. And it was really, that was incredibly difficult too, because I really looked up to him. Like, I wanted to be like my dad. I really did.
Yeah.
And, I mean, not exactly like him, but he was the guy I looked up to. And
that's like that's normal behavior. And I think when grief comes for you, we all choose different straws, right? You're grasping at things. And so,
I mean, hopefully you're not grasping at things, but I fully appreciate that many people could be grasping at things. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I realized kind of at the time, I was terrified to turn out like my mom. I was terrified to turn out like my dad. I felt lost. I was in a real low spot in my life at the time, just because it just felt like life just kept throwing big bags of crap at me, and like it wasn't going to stop. And what's the point? And do I even get back up anymore? Like this, I was going through all this in my head.
Which is normal. Like that's like, let's pause there for a second. If you're listening and you're like, oh my gosh, this is my life. Like there's people keep throwing things at me. It's normal. It's a matter of who do you choose to be, right? What do you choose to do, right? In that moment.
That's the question right there. And it's true. Just kind of going back to that, like when you're in a hole, all you see is the hole and all you feel is the hole, and you don't always know how you're going to get out, or if you even are going to get out. And that's it's a defeating kind of feeling. And kind of recognized I was in that spot and didn't like how that felt. And it's weird I feel like when you're in a low spot, like I'm a big believer that adversity is opportunity. It's an opportunity to learn and grow and really be better for it if you choose for that to happen. And I kind of recognized that I had a choice to make. You already said it, like, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? What kind of life do I want to live? Like, do I actually want to accept defeat here? And I remember saying to myself, I don't know if you can beat mental illness, but I got to try, like that kind of thing. And I kind of
giving yourself a pep talk.
Yeah, but recognizing that I had three choices, and they're the same three choices that all of us have when it comes to our mental health. Number one, we can just cross our fingers and hope for the best and hope everything works out, and everything will be sunshine and roses. And that's just like not a strategy. That's not an option. And it was very clear to me even then at that age, that's not an option. The second option was to do what unfortunately most people do, is wait until things get bad, wait until you're really struggling with something. It could be anxiety, depression. We see a lot of burnout or people burning. We don't work with people once they're burnt out, but it's most people aren't burnt out yet. They're burning.
They're on fire. Yeah.
Right. It's like people balancing the very real demands of work and home and everyday life. And they're trying to keep up, and they're feeling stressed and they're tired and overwhelmed. And again, they're not fully burnt out yet, but they're burning. And so they get used to saying, well, I'm fine, as you're so familiar with, right?
Right.
I'm not mentally ill. I'm fine. And we really need to rethink that, because health is not just the absence of illness. Right? Just because you're not completely burnt out doesn't mean that you're mentally healthy. It just like, in your physical health, just because you don't have two broken legs doesn't mean you're healthy. It just means you're not sick or you're not ill. And so we need to be way better than that. Like, we need to be healthy and fit so we can really show up at our best day in and day out, so we can live our best lives. And so that was really my third option, or the third choice, is be proactive, get mentally healthy, get mentally fit. And that just made a lot more sense to me. And so what I started doing was, it started in part as prevention, but it was really a lot more than that. It was recognizing that not only do I need to prevent a really negative outcome, but I also need a really positive one, right? I want to be this kind of...
You don't want to just not be sick.
I don't want to just not be sick. Exactly.
Yes.
And I don't want to just be fine in my life.
Yeah.
And I think it was at that time that I recognized, when it really did feel like life was that hard, that it would be so easy and so acceptable, really, like to look around you and just say, fine is the goal.
Yes. Right? Yes. I feel like for me, I spent years in the place where it was like, well, I wanted to have a husband. He died. So fine is, I guess this is it. But having the mental strength from your story where you're like, no, I'm not choosing that. I'm not spending any time choosing that.
I'm not choosing that. You know what it was? So scale from 1 to 10, right? Most people, again, living like a 5 or a 6 kind of life. And when I was in that low spot, it felt like I was living a 2. And I wasn't thinking about this scale from 1 to 10. That's actually when it came to me for the very first time, because I recognized, to me, this was the worst it had ever been. I'm like, this is the worst it can get. And I asked myself, if there's a worst, there has to be a best, right? Like that just makes sense. If there's a worst, there has to be a best. So if this is the worst it can get, what's the best it can get? If I'm living like at a 2 now, what's on the other end of this scale?
Right.
There's a 10 there, right? And 10 doesn't mean perfect. Like we said, it's not like every day is a perfect day or the greatest day ever, but it is your best. And so that's what I want. What's my best look like? How am I going to feel? How do I want to show up? I want to live my 10. And so that's really where it started, and recognizing that this is entirely a choice. It's not about your circumstances or your situation. It's not about luck. It's not about the hand that you were dealt. It's not personal. The world's not out to get you, even though it can feel like that sometimes. And I completely understand.
Oh my gosh. One more time. Like, not having the victim mentality, but taking ownership and saying your life might not be 100% your fault, your life circumstances, but your life is 100% your responsibility to take action for. So what was the mental actions that you took to take yourself from a 2, in your opinion, to now a 20, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, you just nailed, I think, the first and maybe the most important thing that any of us can realize is that victim mentality, it really does exist also on a scale from 1 to 10. Everything really exists on that scale. And where we are on that scale, again, it's up to us. So to live your 10, this was the very first like light bulb moment, if you will. Nobody's going to hand it to me. I'm the one responsible for this. If I'm going to live my 10, it's up to me to make that happen. So I've got to own it. I have got to take full accountability, full responsibility. This is me. This is my life. That's on me. And I've got to say, I know for some people that's like an intimidating kind of feeling, but wow, is that empowering.
It's so empowering.
So empowering. It's the most empowering feeling in the world that you, even if you recognize that where you are right now isn't where you want to be, even if you're low on that scale, if you're like, oh, my life isn't, I mean, we work with a lot of people where life is fine. It's good. They're not really struggling. It's yeah, you're doing well. Life's good. You got a lot to be grateful for. You probably have a good career and good family person and all that stuff, but you want to be your best. You want to move from good to great. But the point is, it doesn't matter where you are on that scale or where you are in your life. Once you recognize that it's up to you, everything changes. And so that was the very first thing. And it's a big theme in the mental gym, is recognizing all these little areas of our lives where we might not be taking responsibility, where we might have that default mindset of victim mentality. And it doesn't mean that you are full 100% victim all the time. It's recognizing that the more we can remove victim mentality and the more we can replace it with taking full ownership, own your life, live your 10, the closer and closer and closer you get to living your 10. So that was really the first big one. But once you kind of grasp that, not just like an intellectual grasp, but once you like get it, we like grokking it. I don't know if you've ever heard that term. Like, you know, grokking. Yeah. You grok it. It's like you understand it in your bones almost. Then everything else starts to make a lot more sense. And what I started to see is I really started to pay attention that there were these themes that I noticed in the way both my mom and my dad were showing up. Like one of the big themes was a victim mentality, right? As things got worse, there was more of a victim mentality. You cannot be happy in life with a victim mentality. It just doesn't work. And that was, for me, that was the first thing that I understood about living in year 10, that I just wanted to be happy in life.
Yeah.
Right. I later understood that it was more about fulfillment even than happiness. But at the time I just called it happy. And rule number one is people with victim mindset aren't happy. So
I love that. I love that because you're settling. If you have a victim mindset, you're settling for your fine or your 5 or your 6
or worse, right?
Right.
Like, depending on how extreme that is,
and justifying it
because it's safer and easier to justify it.
Right.
You don't have to change anything. And again, like you're just selling yourself short. You're cheating yourself. And I think you're disrespecting yourself if you take that attitude.
That's right? Really good.
Like, don't disrespect yourself that way. You deserve. I'm not big on deserve, by the way. The word deserve, I think people throw that around too much. But I think you deserve to treat yourself with the utmost respect. You deserve to be honest with yourself, even if you don't always like what the truth is. And you deserve to. You do that without judgment. Like, don't judge yourself about it. Don't judge where you are. Just recognize you have an opportunity to be better. And that's a really powerful thing for people.
I love that you share. Well. Yeah. I love that you share that you don't like the word deserve. That word was such a trigger for me when my husband first died, because people were like, you deserve better. And I was like, why?
Right. I think we kind of throw around that word, but I see deserve as more like we deserve to have the opportunity, but we don't deserve the result. The result is something we need to create.
I don't think that I understood 10 years ago why the word deserve triggered me so much when people would say, well, you deserve that. You deserve happiness. You deserve a husband. You deserve whatever. But in the back of my mind, I understood that I had to own it and work for it.
Yeah, for sure.
To get what, and I do believe, like, yes, we deserve whatever, but not without the effort and the mindset and the work. To get to be that place that's a 10.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It goes back to your life as your responsibility, right? And yes, we all deserve happiness, but it's not going to be handed to us necessarily on a
happiness.
Right. You have to choose. So that was the first big step that you made.
Yeah, that was huge, because once I understood that first I wanted to live my 10. It's kind of like you kind of like plant your flag, right? You make your mark and you're like, this is my declaration to myself. It didn't need to be to anybody else.
Right.
So this is my declaration to myself that I'm going to live my 10. You notice that you're now all of a sudden pointed in a different direction. You start to think about things differently. You start to make decisions differently. You start to behave differently, not in giant ways, but it's a little tweak here, a little adjustment there, a little improvement there. And that's really what the mental gym's all about, right? We don't say like, hey, okay, Dana, go make these big giant changes in your life. That's how you're going to live your 10. It's just week to week. We work on like a new mental tool or a habit. We're developing the skills, developing the mindset. And so it's all of these little micro changes that compound. They add up and they add up and they add up and they fit together like puzzle pieces, this wonderful puzzle for living your 10. And the more puzzle pieces click, the easier it is for more to click, because you get how things work. And it's a really wonderful thing. And so that's exactly what was happening to me at that time in my life. I just was discovering and adding new puzzle pieces that really fit with this puzzle. It's like, if this concept of taking ownership makes sense, then, for example, not taking things personally makes sense, because I noticed that people a lot of the time who weren't taking ownership would take things personally, and they would get really triggered and offended and reactive to things. And we all do that. It's not like some people do and some people don't. Like everybody
Right.
does it to some extent, but how much are you going to do that? And when I saw,
and how deeply are you going to let that resonate in your heart when you do take offense to something?
Exactly. So it became that thing that if some people are doing it on one end of the scale, if taking things personally happens on one end of the scale, what happened if I never took anything personally? What if nothing was personal? Again, what an amazing puzzle piece.
Right.
And so it's just things like that. It's what if I took accountability? What if I chose the right mindset? Mm-hmm. What if I chose trust and respect and fantastic communication in my relationships to make sure they're the best they can be?
So would you say that step one in your mind is when something is happening that you pause to decide who do I want to be in this moment? Right.
Well, look, step one is recognizing that you want your 10. You don't need to know what it is or what it looks like or how to get there. We're very North Americanized in that way, where we think of 10, we compare it to other people's 10s. We start to think about the big house and the nice car. And those things are great. I'm not saying don't have those things. It's just, don't worry about what it is or what it looks like or how you're going to do that. Just recognize that you need to point yourself in a direction, because you're pointed in a direction anyway. Mm-hmm. So just choose that one. And once we have that understanding that you are choosing 6 and you're not choosing 7, that you are choosing 10 and you're not choosing 7. Mm-hmm. Once you're clear on that, then everything that we work on together in the mental gym, every decision that we make now has so much more relevance to you, because you can choose your 10 or you can choose not your 10.
Right. Because every decision that you don't make is a decision that you do make. Right. Sure. If you're allowing life to happen to you and making no decisions, you've made a decision.
You made a decision.
Right. It just was the easiest decision. And I do want to just pause there to recognize that it is the easiest decision. And sometimes we're exhausted and mm-hmm. we're tired and we don't want to put in the energy. I feel like I lived there for years after my husband died. Like I didn't want to put in the mental energy to figure out how I got myself out of this situation. But if you come back to what you said originally, you have to get to the place where you're like, this is not good enough.
It's not the best decision for me.
Right.
I agree with you. It's the easiest decision in the moment. And that's why we make easy decisions. It's a much harder decision, big picture and over time. Much harder.
100%.
The easier decision over time is to think like a 10, make decisions like a 10, behave like a 10, live like a 10. Again, just incrementally improving in that way. I believe that living a 5 as much as or a 6 as much as it might be easier, again, in the moment. I don't have to put in the effort. Hey, I don't have to exercise, or I don't have to work on my relationship, and I don't have to look in the mirror, and I don't have to do any of these things. Like, sure, it's easier in the moment. No different from, I don't know, a drug addict. It's easier to get your fix in the moment than to work on it and mm-hmm. change your habits, right? But what's that going to do to your life over time? What's that going to do to your relationships and your work and your health and all of those things? And so
if you're listening right now, the takeaway from the conversation for you sharing to live your 10 is, what's one micro thing that we can do right this second to change that trajectory for ourselves? Again,
the very first thing is just recognize that there is a scale from 1 to 10 and choose where you want to be on there. Yeah. And don't think about 10 as perfect, and don't think about it as some unreachable goal. It's really just a direction. The goals and the tangible parts of it happen on that journey. But let's just recognize that we can choose anywhere on that scale, and it is no harder to choose 10 than it is to choose 7. So why not choose 10?
So if you want to choose 10, but you're at a 7, how would you advise us to take the steps to get to an 8 and get to a 9? If you've recognized it, what's the next step in your process?
Yeah, great question. So I mentioned earlier that when living your 10 first started for me, I needed something to attach to it, like some meaning to give to it. And to me, that was happiness. Mm-hmm. I wanted to, and it was kind of easy for me to do, because I was looking at, say, my mom and just seeing how unhappy she was, right? Like, she was miserable. She was severely depressed, and I was in an unhappy place. So that made a lot of sense to me. And I started saying, if you're not happy in life, something's got to change. Like, if you live an unhappy life, you're not living your 10, you can't live your 10. Almost like it's the most important thing in life, isn't it? And when you recognize that so much of who we are and what we do and the choices we make in life are because we want to be happy. We're hoping to be happy. We're not aspiring to be unhappy. We're hoping to be happy. We might not have the right recipe to be happy, because the one we learned, again, is like a recipe for a 6 or a 7. But
right.
So again, it's not your fault that that's what you learned, and you're probably surrounded by other people who are living a 5, 6, maybe 7. And so it's kind of all we've known and all we've learned because it's just so normal for us. If you were surrounded by people living their 10s, it's a lot easier for you to live your 10, right?
Yeah.
So that was really important, identifying something. Now, it might not be happiness and fulfillment for everybody. I certainly recommend that. I believe that that's the answer right there. But for some people, it might be leaving a mark or a legacy. It might be freedom. It might be peace of mind. It might be health, whatever it is. Again, I believe that all falls under the same umbrella. We choose those things because they make us happy and they help us feel fulfilled.
But I think that there's a huge pause to share that in this formula that you're talking about, or that we're talking about, it's finding that 10 within you. And I think the American way is to say, well, I'm at a 7. And if I had X, if I had Y, if I had Z, I would then be a 10. And so you start chasing the job, the relationship, the kids, the whatever, because you feel that that's going to fulfill you and make you at a 10. And I think the underlying point of everything that you're doing is getting to that 10 yourself by every little decision that you make. For
sure. So let's stop thinking about 10 as what you want, and let's start thinking about 10 as who you want to be.
I love that. Who do you want to be?
Who do you want to be? That's it. Because again, we could say, like you said, okay, how are you going to get that job, and how are you going to attract that partner, and how are you going to, no, like I'm not saying we shouldn't have those things or want those things. I love being married. I love being a dad. It's the greatest thing in the world to me. I love having work that I'm so passionate about and that makes a difference in the world. Like it's amazing. We should want and have these things. This is fulfilling, entirely fulfilling. That is very much who you are, because who you are and how you show up. When you're showing up like a 10 version of yourself, you make decisions like a 10 version of yourself. You choose the 10 path and the 10 options. For example, in dating, like I always knew from the time I was very young how much I wanted to be married and have kids, and how important being a dad was going to be to me. Like I always knew that. And one of the most challenging things for me was I was a very picky dater. I had very high standards.
Which you should.
Yes. But I believe there's 2 types of people with high standards. One of them is nothing's ever good enough for them, and it never will ever be good enough for them, but really they're not stepping up. So they just find fault in everybody else, and they think they're the best, they're perfect, everyone else is flawed. And so no one's going to meet up. And I'm sorry that there's a whole lot of self-awareness that's missing there.
Right.
Because the other side of it is, yes, I do have that high standard, but recognizing that I need to meet that standard myself, which means I got to be working on myself. I got to be better. I remember my last girlfriend before my wife and I broke up, and we were together for a while. We were together 2.5 years. I thought we would maybe get married. Like it was one of those. It was not like a casual relationship or anything like that. And I remember when we broke up, we were having like the breakup conversation, like the exit interview when you're leaving a job kind of thing. And she said this thing to me that got tattooed on my brain. She said, and it hurt. I remember it really stung when she said it. She said, "You were a good boyfriend, but you weren't a great one." And when it hurts, when it's true.
Wow.
Right? It's true. And I just thought about it for a second, and like your instinct is I want to push back and be defensive here and be like, well, you weren't great either. And it's like,
right.
No, right. None of that.
Who do you want to be in that moment? Who do you want to be in that moment?
And I just let it sink in. And I just remember thinking and feeling to myself, you're right.
Yeah.
And it's not because I didn't care, and it's not because I didn't want to. It's because I've got some growing to do here.
Yeah.
Right. Like I need to be better. And so this time we broke up 2 years before my wife and I met. And in that time, recognizing that the 10 relationship that I wanted to have, and eventually the 10 marriage that I wanted to have, wasn't going to happen without me becoming that 10 version of myself.
Yes.
Not only that, why would a 10 woman be attracted to a 7 me?
Right. We all have the ability to be that 10.
Yeah.
And your 10 maybe is different than my 10, but finding the person that completes your 10 or is on the same level, not necessarily completes it, but is on the same level, then you grow together to a 12 and a 15 and a 20. Exactly. And that's when you have a dynamite marriage.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember that breakup, I got a lot of criticism from people, and they're saying your standards are too high. You're never going to find what you're looking for. Nothing's ever good enough for you. And I was like, yeah, I won't settle. Like I won't, because I know what my life will be like if I'm in a marriage that I don't want to be in. I mean, my parents were together and apart, together and apart, together and apart.
Yeah, you had a great example of that growing up.
Yeah. And I think a great example of why you don't take this for granted and why it's worth working on day in and day out.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the change started with you from the dynamic that you were raised in. And now you are teaching. Let's talk about what you are teaching. Like you are teaching this. You have courses, you have classes. Like now you have created a program to help all of us be more mentally strong. I love the mentally
healthy and fit. Yeah.
Mentally healthy and fit, because that's the same. I mean, I am constantly talking about physically fit. I was physically fit when my husband died, but I did not have the mental aptitude that I needed or the resilience to deal with the life that I was then now living. And so we need the action steps. So how can we find you? How can we join your courses? Tell us more about what you're doing with all of this great knowledge.
Yeah. So one of the coolest things in the mental gym is kind of how it works. It's not just about here are some great ideas and, run with it. It's like a group exercise class. So if you've ever been to a spin class or a CrossFit class.
I teach those classes. I know how to do it.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. In fact, the idea for the mental gym came to me in the middle of a CrossFit class.
Yeah.
I love this group model where we might be coming from different walks of life or have different perspectives or whatever, but we're showing up together for this thing that we do together, and we support each other, and we surround ourselves with other people who push us to be better and hold us to a higher standard. So this isn't like group therapy, what we're doing. It's not reactive at all. We're not looking back ever. We're always looking forward. It's a very positive, very honest, very real, very safe place. There's no filter. Just we treat each other with a ton of respect, and there's no judgment, and we're real. And what we do is we take that environment with this fantastic energy to it, and each workout has kind of this, here's what we're working on today. Here is this very relevant, very relatable topic that's going to impact your life. And let's learn this. Let's take this big idea and break it down into super small parts so we can really digest it and understand it and make it our own. And we take that and we work on it for that 1 hour. It's 1 hour once a week. We have a little bit of self-work that everybody does on their own between workouts, right? To take what we're working on in the gym and start integrating into your life, which is, that integration is everything. And then next week, we're going to build on it. We're going to hear about the self-work and how it went. We're going to work on a new concept or a new idea, and we're going to keep building it. And we do that consistently. So this is something that I think is just so important. If you think about physical health, you wouldn't eat a salad one time. You wouldn't lift weights one time. You wouldn't go for a run one time and say,
I don't know. I think a lot of people just eat a salad for one time and then they're like, well, where's my dream body? How come it didn't happen? Like,
right? Now here's the thing. Anytime you start something new, like if you go to the gym, you lift weights for the first time, it's a challenge the first time, but the second time is a little bit easier. The third time it's a little bit easier. And once you kind of get into a groove of things, it just becomes normal for you. This is who I am and this is what I do. I'm a healthy person, so I take care of myself. I'm someone who's a great parent and a great partner and a great leader at work and a great teammate and a high performer. And I feel great. So I go to the mental gym for 1 hour once a week. Like it's just,
I love that. And I love that we all understand the importance of community. Like community is everything. And we touched on it a little while ago where it's, if you surround yourself by a bunch of people that have that victim mentality and just take the fact that life is given to them, then you will slowly become that. But you are providing through the mental gym, the ability to change your surroundings, change your peer group, put yourself in a different room with people that are thinking at a higher level, which will help you to think at a higher level and then attract more of those people into your inner circle.
For sure. I mean, it's tough to live your 10 when you're not only surrounded by 5s and 6s, but we got to be really careful. If you're going to live your 10, you can't be overly influenced anyway, by people living their 5s and 6s. Mm-hmm. And so if you were to go out into your just kind of your normal life and your family or something, you're like, you know what, I'm going to live my 10. There's a good chance that people aren't going to get it because, again, most people are living a 5 or a 6. But when you're surrounded by other people who also are aspiring to their 10s and working towards their 10s, and because it's so real and human, you see that we're all on this journey of trying to be our best together. And so we experience a lot of the same challenges and have a lot of the same questions and see a lot of the same wins. We're very big on wins. We hear like progress wins every week to start off our workouts, just on a really positive note. Sometimes there's little things, right? Hey, I just did this little thing differently, but that little thing compounds into something much bigger. There's a ripple effect. And so we really love that. And yeah, it's that idea that we're in this together. We show up for ourselves. We show up for each other with support, with guidance, with accountability, with consistency.
Yeah, when you are surrounding yourself by other people that are truly passionate about living their 10, you also realize that when you were surrounding yourself by people maybe that were living at a 5 or a 6 and you were doubting yourself, like, am I nuts for thinking this way? You get that validation by putting yourself in a different room to realize, no, there are other people aspiring for XYZ. So tell us, how do we get involved? How can we take a course? I love all of this. I want to be in that room. Yeah. I want to be with all of the people. Sign me up, Cory. How do I do it?
So most of our work right now is focused on teams and organizations. We work with companies. We work with their leaders and emerging leaders and their high performers and their hidden gems. I got to say, it's a fantastic thing when you don't know who that person's going to be, but they emerge and become those total rock stars in your organization.
Yeah.
Again, promoted faster, make more money, all those sorts of things. But like, people know
the tangible assets, yes, but it starts with your mental strength.
Absolutely, it does. People notice you are showing up differently and you're doing it consistently. So that's huge. So we have Mental Gym, three like key levels of the program to begin. Level 1 is a 12-week program. Level 2 is a 12-week program. Level 3 is a 12-week program, but are these fantastic programs. And to see the transformations in people with that, again, that compounding effect of learning to think, make decisions, and behave like that 10 version of themselves, the way they show up, the way they notice it in themselves, the way other people notice it in them is really remarkable. I mean, it's exciting to see.
It's so exciting to see other people recognize that you're showing up differently.
Isn't it?
Yes. And that you have a different posture. I know that you and I have talked about my journey and this journey, and I think they're so very similar with understanding, taking the first step to recognize that you want more for your life, and then understanding the different paths that you can take to get there. So how do we follow you? How do we connect with you? I will link all of this in the show notes, you guys, but Cory, share with us how we can stalk you. Where can we go?
Yeah. Stalk me on LinkedIn. That's where I kind of hang out. LinkedIn's a great place. You can check out our website, mentalgymlife.com. For anyone out there who's thinking this might be something that you'd like to learn more about, especially for your team or your company or organization, try a workout. Just come try a workout. And
can we try a workout for free? How do we do that?
Yeah, it's free. There's a link right on the website to just sign up to experience a workout. You just fill out a little bit of information. We'll get in touch with you. And you can either do it as like join a group with people from other companies and that sort of thing. Or we can even just do one for your team. We just want you to get a taste, to experience what this environment's like, what it feels like to take that 1 hour out of your very busy schedule and just focus on yourself and your mental health and your growth and connecting with other like-minded people.
Oh my gosh, I love that. If you're listening, I will drop that in the show notes as well. And I'm going to sign up. Who's going to join me and do the first free class? I definitely am going to do that, Cory. Do you have anything else that you want to add?
I mean, there's so many things I feel like we could talk for hours, right?
I can talk about mental fitness forever. It is so important. And I think it's something that's so overlooked because we have just, and we said this earlier, as a society, normalized being fine.
Yeah.
Being being fine for me wasn't even a 5. I was probably living a 7 or an 8, but I wanted to be living a 10 or a 12 and connecting the dots to get there. I think the biggest takeaway for me from all of the conversations with you is that the recognizing piece, recognizing that you want more.
You want more.
And it's in that moment that you decide to stop settling. You decide to stop faking fine. You decide to seek solutions for what you want for your life. And I think the systems that you have, that you teach at the mental gym, are one fantastic step that you can take to put yourself in a new room, surround yourself with different people, and start to live your 10, right?
Right. Absolutely. I love what you just said too about recognizing where you are. Can I share a quick story about when I really recognized that? So, I mean, I shared what happened when I was kind of at the low end of that scale, but just as important on this journey was when I was much higher up on that scale. I owned a business that was successful, and I didn't hate going to work. I really enjoyed going to work, and I had a great team and great customers. And, but I felt like I was hitting a ceiling. And I remember this feeling that I kind of got to a point where I wasn't working that hard, and, business was running really well. Again, I had a great team, and, I was like anxious and stressed, and I didn't know why. And it wasn't until it really clicked with me that I was kind of topping out at like a 7, 8, but I wasn't living my 10. And there were 3 really big components of that. And these are very big mental gym concepts right now, but we call them the 3 W's. The first W is who, like, who are you? Who do you want to be? Who are you capable of being? The second W is why. Like, what are you doing it for? Why is this important to you? What's that sense of purpose or that sense of contribution or the impact that you can make by showing up as that best version of yourself? And the third W is with. Who are you doing it with? Have the greatest relationships you can with the people who matter most, right? It makes life so much better.
So much better.
And I just recognized that it took me a while because I was kind of living by this old recipe of checking the boxes. I had a good business. I drove a cool car. I had a great girlfriend I thought I was going to marry. It wasn't it. Our relationship was also like a 7, 8, and that's all it was. But I didn't want to accept that at the time because it was really fine. Like, it was really fine. And one of the big challenges that people have, like, I think when you're at a 5, it's easier to recognize that you're at a 5. When you're at like a 7, 8 level, you almost feel guilty for wanting more because you're like, who am I to want more? I've got all these great things in my life and I should just be grateful for what I have. And I remember this feeling that I am grateful for everything that I have.
But I want more.
But I want more, right? And you wake up one day and you think, and I remember this, I just like this, so clear to me that there's got to be more to life than this, right? Like there's got to be. And once that kind of sunk into my head, it's like, okay, I need to know what that more out of life is. And so I'm not saying anybody else should do this or needs to do this. For me, the right decision at the time was I sold my business. My girlfriend and I were we had broken up right around that same time. And it was just very clear to me that saying yes to 7 is not saying yes to 10, because you can't say yes to 7 and say yes to 10 at the same time.
No, but I think also like that 7 was probably your 10 at one point.
Well, you're on the journey, right?
You're right.
It's not a destination. It's a journey.
It's a journey. And that 7, that place that now you recognized was a 7, probably was what you recognized was your 10 a couple of years prior.
Absolutely it was.
And then you grew a business. You were thriving in that business. You loved going to work, but you get angsty when you're in situations that you've outgrown.
Yes, exactly.
And understanding, having the self-awareness to realize, like, I'm getting a little bit unsettled. I'm a little bit anxious. It's because you've outgrown that. And then finding the tools, I applaud you for selling that business and stepping into growing or continuing to grow. I guess you weren't stepping into it. You were continuing to grow. And really, that's the path we all want to be on.
just keep growing, like always learning, always growing, always getting a little bit better. Just like every day, just get a tiny, tiny little bit better. And yeah, that was a big one for me. And then it's kind of like, it's 10 only, right? There's no 10 or something else. It's like, it's 10 or it's not 10. In fact, that's how we teach people to think, 10 or not 10. And it really makes decision-making easy and just, it simplifies it. It makes your choices very clear when you think that way. Again, it's something that you kind of need to learn how to do and practice with guidance. But I mean, just any of your listeners right now can start asking themselves that question, 10 or not 10, like, who do I want to be, 10 or not 10?
Who do I want to be? And is this decision that I'm about to make going to bring me closer to living at that 10 or take me farther away from living at that 10? And breaking it down into every single little decision that ends up accumulating, and we call it life.
That's exactly it, right? Your decisions all accumulate and point you in a direction one way or another. Like, no matter how you're making your decisions, they're pointing you in a direction. So they're either pointing you to a 3, a 5, a 7, 8, or you're 10, and you've got to decide which direction you want them to go in. It's a wonderful feeling when you recognize that you are choosing the right direction for you. And it's not a perfect straight line, like we talked about earlier, and it doesn't mean every day is the best day. It's just it's about knowing which way you're headed. And when you get knocked off course, you've got the mental tools and skills to get back on course.
You have the resilience to get back on. When you fall off your bike, you have the resilience to get back on with your skinned knees, and you just keep going. Oh my gosh.
Resilience, grit, the growth mindset, like all of this goes together. These are all big themes in the mental gym too. We need all of this. There are just certain concepts and principles and tools that we all need. And the better we can get at them and the more we can develop them, the better we're going to be in life. Like, it really is as simple as that. Better at home, better at work, better in our communities. I mean, this is who we want to be and how we want to show up.
Heck yeah. And the first step is recognizing that that's how you want to show up, so that you stop faking fine, right? Oh my gosh, Cory.
Yeah.
This has been so amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I will drop all of the links in the show notes below. You can find Cory Chadwick on LinkedIn. You can follow the Mental Gym. What was the website again?
mentalgymlife.com.
mentalgymlife.com. We're all going to take that free course. And until next time, I hope that you stop faking fine and you lean in to living your 10. And if this episode served you a purpose and you loved it, share it with a friend. We will see you next time. Thanks, Cory.
Thanks, Dana.